My name is Emily Carson, and 3 weeks ago I canceled my family's Cancun vacation while sipping espresso at Gate A14 and watching the sunrise through the airport window. They still think it was a mistake. It was. I had canceled their flights, every single one, using my own credit card account they'd been secretly charging for months. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. Because if you've ever trusted the wrong people just because they share your last name, this story is for you. It started on a sticky Sunday evening in Tampa. Our dining room was dimly lit, the overhead fan doing little to move the muggy air. The walls were lined with family photos, birthdays, graduations, Christmases, and yet, somehow, none of them felt like mine anymore. I'd spent the entire morning mentally rehearsing the announcement. My hands still smelled faintly of Lysol from scrubbing the countertops, and I had made roast chicken just the way Mom liked, with rosemary and lemon. I'd even baked cornbread, even though I hate cornbread. Maybe I thought that if everything felt perfect, then maybe they'd feel proud of me. I waited until the plates were full and the tension was at its lowest, or so I thought. So, I started, trying not to sound too excited. I've officially saved enough for a down payment. I'm planning to meet with a mortgage broker next month and start the paperwork. There was silence for a moment, brief, expectant. My heart pounded like a kid admitting a crush. Then came the scoff from across the table. My dad, Peter Midshew, let out a short laugh. A mortgage? You, Mom Carol, ever the queen of dismissive facial expressions, didn't even look up from her plate. She just rolled her eyes and muttered, "Oh, please." But it was Natalie, my older sister, who really twisted the knife. She burst into laughter, genuine, loud, and sharp. "As if you'll ever grow up enough to handle that," she said, shaking her head and stabbing her fork into her salad. "You can barely keep your closet organized." The chicken went cold in my mouth. I looked at each of them. No one met my eyes, not even a forced congrats or a half-hearted smile, just smug, familiar silence. I didn't say anything after that. I kept chewing, eyes on my plate, pretending I didn't notice the way Dad smirked as he sipped his beer or the way Mom started scrolling on her phone. It wasn't the first time they'd undermined me. But this time, it wasn't about a boyfriend or a messy car or forgetting someone's birthday. This time, it was about me trying to leave. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, the one with the faded lilac wallpaper and the creaky ceiling fan that never quite stopped groaning, and tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that they were just surprised, that maybe they didn't mean it like that. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew exactly what that laughter meant. They didn't want me to grow up. Not really, because if I left, who would pay for groceries when the fridge was low? Who would hand over their debit card when the Wi-Fi bill came in higher than expected? Who would fill up Dad's gas tank when he was between paychecks again? Or let Mom borrow her login to pay for a spa appointment? I wasn't their daughter, I was their safety net. And the moment I hinted at cutting that cord, they panicked. Only instead of begging me to stay, they did what they'd always done. They belittled me. And the worst part, I almost let them. Almost. But that Sunday night, as the sound of Natalie's laughter echoed in my head, I made a promise to myself. This time I'm not backing down. This time I'm going to fight for what's mine. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, the journal I hadn't touched in months open on my lap. The pen hovered for a while before it touched paper. They laughed at me. Those were the first words I wrote. Not "I'm angry," not "I'm hurt." Just a simple truth that once written felt heavier than anything I could say aloud. The pages quickly filled. It was like uncorking a bottle I didn't know was under pressure. The memories came spilling out, moments I'd buried under duty, obligation, or the convenient lie that this is just what families do. I thought about the groceries. Every week, I'd Venmo my mom half the bill and then some. But somehow, I always ended up doing the actual shopping too. Then there was the gas. My dad had borrowed my debit card, just until the end of the week, more times than I could count. Once, I found out he'd filled his tank and Natalie's, when I hadn't even been able to afford getting my own tires rotated. My car, a modest used Hyundai, but it was the only one that worked reliably. Natalie's fancy little SUV sat in the driveway most days, out of commission from some mysterious engine issue no one ever addressed. So when Mom needed to go to the pharmacy, when Dad wanted to pick up wings during a game, or when Natalie's emergency girls' night called for a designated driver, guess whose keys they grabbed? Every time I'd say yes. Not because I wanted to, but because saying no always came with consequences, eye rolls, guilt trips, or worse, the heavy silence that hung in the house like a punishment. I thought moving back home after grad school would be temporary. A few months, max. I was supposed to get on my feet, save money, and then freedom. That was 4 years ago. Somewhere between job changes, family emergencies, and the quiet erosion of my boundaries, a few months turned into a lifestyle. Not mine, theirs, because I was the responsible one. The good girl. The one who always cleaned up, filled in, lent out, and never asked for anything in return. Until now. Until I said I was leaving. I stared at the numbers on my phone's banking app. The down payment wasn't huge, barely enough for a modest condo with outdated tile and squeaky windows, but it was mine. Scraped together from late-night freelance gigs and years of cutting back on everything from clothes to toothpaste. But even as I stared at it, pride flickering quietly in my chest, I felt something else creep in. Doubt. What if they're right? What if I'm not ready? What if I fall flat on my face and have to come crawling back? That was the thing about growing up in a house where love came with conditions. You started to confuse compliance with worthiness. And somewhere along the way, I had learned to equate survival with silence. But I was done being silent. I flipped to a fresh page in my journal and started writing something different, something cold, methodical, and painfully overdue. A list. $60. Dad borrowed last Tuesday for gas $120. Grocery bill I paid in full after accidental overdraft on mom's card $240. Natalie's dry cleaning and emergency online shopping she promised to pay me back for $780. Car maintenance, only for my car, which they all used. I scrolled through bank transactions, cross-checked receipts, and started building a spreadsheet on my laptop. The totals made my stomach twist. Over the past year alone, I'd lost close to $5,000 in favors. And that wasn't counting the emotional toll, the missed sleep, the quiet resentment, the way I always felt guilty for wanting less noise, more space, something of my own. They didn't see it that way, of course. To them, I was just being dramatic or overly sensitive. But isn't it funny how the moment you start enforcing a boundary, everyone who benefited from you having none calls it betrayal? Around midnight, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth like a robot. My reflection looked tired, pale. I didn't feel like the kind of person who could own a home. But I also didn't feel like the girl who used to cry quietly when her mom took her last $40 for a hair appointment either. Somewhere between those two women I was becoming someone new. I rinsed my mouth and looked at myself again. I'm going to do this, I whispered. Not just buy the condo. But everything. I was going to separate my finances, reclaim my space, draw lines and mean them, even if they didn't like it, especially if they didn't like it, because I wasn't their safety net anymore. I was done carrying everyone else's weight while pretending it didn't break my back. And no matter how loud the laughter at that dinner table had been, it couldn't drown out the truth rising inside me. I'm not their puppet. I'm not their ATM. And I'm not staying in this house another year just to make everyone else comfortable. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. There's something about the house at dawn. It's quiet in a way that feels borrowed. Like even the walls are holding their breath. I moved slowly, careful not to let the hallway floorboards creak as I made my way to the kitchen. I didn't make coffee. I didn't want anyone wandering in from the smell. Instead, I sat at the dining room table, the same one where they laughed at me the night before, and opened my laptop. I'd bookmarked the bank's website the night before. My palms were sweating as I clicked through the options. Order replacement card. Change PIN. Enable text alerts for transactions over $10. $1 by one. I checked them off. My hands shook just a little when I submitted the change of mailing address for all future statements to my work address. Not home. Not here. I wasn't naive. I knew what would come next. The moment they noticed I'd cut off the tap, even just a trickle, they'd take it personally. They'd say I didn't trust them. They'd say I was punishing them. They'd say I was selfish, so I didn't announce it. I just started. By noon, my phone buzzed. Mom, did you block my Instacart again? Dad, gas pump said card declined. NATALI. Did you freeze your account or something? I stared at the messages, heart racing. I knew they'd notice eventually. I just didn't expect it to feel like this, equal parts terror and thrill. Like climbing onto the roof in a lightning storm, but I didn't respond. That evening when I came home from work, the air in the house had changed. Dinner was already made, Mom's famous guilt casserole, heavy on the cheese and even heavier on the passive aggression. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. "We saved you a plate," Dad said, but his voice was cool, careful. "Yeah," Natalie added, not looking up from her phone. "Heard you've been busy today." I sat down quietly, my throat tight. Mom waited exactly 2 minutes before starting. "So," she said, like someone teeing up a weather report, "something wrong with your bank card?" "Nope," I said, keeping my tone light. "Just updated some things." She set down her fork, slow and deliberate. "You know, it's very hurtful to treat your family like criminals." "I never said anyone was a criminal," I replied. "I just decided to make some changes." "We raised you," she said, and there it was, the tone, the one that made every conversation feel like a courtroom cross-examination. "Yeah," Dad added, shaking his head. "This feels like punishment after all we've done." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I didn't lash out. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm protecting myself, that's allowed." Natalie let out a sharp laugh. "You're so paranoid, like we're out to rob you or something." I turned to her then, steady and calm. "I've been covering more than half the groceries, letting you use my car without insurance, and never got a cent back from the stuff you ordered with my card." She blinked. "You're seriously keeping tabs?" "I am now." Silence. I stood up, plate untouched. "From now on, I'd like to handle my own expenses, my own accounts, my own life." Mom's voice turned icy. "So now you're better than us?" "No," I said. "I'm just finally done pretending this is normal." I left my plate on the table, walked down the hall, and shut my bedroom door behind me. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like losing something I never really had. The illusion that they'd be happy for me once I stopped making myself small for their comfort. But I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop again and started something new. A spreadsheet. Unauthorized charges. Natalie's Amazon spree, $212.34. Mom's skincare box, $89.99. Dad's sports streaming bundle, $42.99. Month X4. I took screenshots. I downloaded statements. I started building a case, not for court, but for clarity. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission to protect my future. I was just doing it. I didn't expect anything from that week at work. I'd been so tangled in the chaos at home that I barely noticed the end-of-quarter meetings or the whispers about bonuses. But on Thursday, just as I was packing up for the day, my manager, Jolene, stopped by my desk with a smile. "You're not going anywhere yet," she said, eyes twinkling. "You're coming with me." I blinked. "Am I in trouble?" Jolene laughed. "Only if getting recognized for your work is a crime." She led me to the conference room where the rest of our small team had gathered. The lights were dimmed and there was cake. Real cake. I barely heard what she said at first, my heart was pounding, but then I caught the words. "For landing the Gibson account and going above and beyond with the client handoff." Wait, what? "A surprise bonus in recognition of your contribution." Everyone clapped. I think I smiled. I hope I smiled. But inside, something cracked open. Not the kind of crack that breaks you, more like the kind that lets light in after a long time in the dark. After everything at home, I'd gotten used to invisibility, to effort being dismissed, to sacrifices becoming expectations. But here, at a beige desk, in a windowless room that smelled faintly of toner, I was seen. And paid. The bonus wasn't massive, but it was enough. Enough to finally push me over the threshold. Enough to make the down payment feel real. Enough to breathe. After the meeting, Jolene pulled me aside. "You've worked hard, Emily. You deserve this. Maybe now you can finally get that place of your own, huh?" I nodded, my voice tight with emotion. "Yeah, that's the plan." As soon as I got home, I typed a message in the family group chat. "Hey, just got a bonus at work. It means I'm officially in condo range, starting to look at listings this weekend." Mom read it instantly, left it on scene. Natalie replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No congratulations. No proud of you. Not even a fake smile. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then closed the app. I wasn't going to beg them to be happy for me. They made it clear. This wasn't a family rooting for me. This was a family that relied on me staying stuck. But I wasn't stuck anymore. I spent that night scrolling through real estate listings, heart fluttering with every thumbnail. Most of them were modest, tiny kitchens, carpet I'd rip out in a heartbeat, low ceilings, but they had something magical: privacy, freedom, a front door that only I had a key to, I found one that made my breath catch. A little one-bedroom with a balcony and crooked charm in an older part of town. It wasn't perfect, but it was possible. And for the first time in years, I could see it. I could see myself there. The next morning, I woke up buzzing. I made coffee and opened the front door for the delivery I was expecting, just a pair of new flats from a sale I'd been eyeing for months. But something else was sitting on the welcome mat. A thick envelope from my credit card company. My stomach dropped. I tore it open and scanned the first page. Available credit used, $768.42 new purchases. PS5 console, luxury bath sets, subscription skincare, same-day shipping. My breath caught. None of it was mine. I sat down on the stoop, the sun suddenly too bright. Inside the envelope were printed receipts, each one with my name on it, but I hadn't made a single purchase. Gaming consoles, high-end bath stuff, serums I couldn't even pronounce, and all shipped here, to this address. I stood up and walked inside. Natalie was in the kitchen pouring herself cereal. "Hey," I said carefully. "Did you order anything on my credit card this week?" She didn't even blink. "Oh yeah, just a few things. You said you were getting a bonus, so I figured you wouldn't mind." I stared at her. "You figured?" She rolled her eyes. "Relax, it's not like I bought a car, it was just stuff we needed." I clenched the envelope in my hand. Mom strolled in just then, still in her robe. I was meaning to ask, did that foot mask come in yet? My heels are killing me. I couldn't speak. I felt like a ghost in my own life. No one even looked guilty. Not a shred of hesitation, not even the decency to lie. Just entitlement, as natural as breathing. "It's not a big deal," Natalie added. "You'll barely notice it once your little condo thing happens. And besides, you're the one who's always preaching about generosity." That's when it hit me. They didn't think they were stealing. They thought they were owed. I didn't yell. I didn't scream or throw the envelope or demand repayment. Not because I wasn't angry, I was, but because I knew how that would go. I could already hear the responses. "Don't be dramatic. It's just money. We're family." And if I lost my temper, I'd be giving them exactly what they wanted, a scene they could blame me for. So I swallowed the fury, nodded once, and turned around. Back in my room, I locked the door. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. It wasn't just the money. It was the violation, the audacity of it. They didn't even ask. They didn't hide it or apologize. It wasn't a mistake, it was routine. I opened my laptop and pulled up my account. Pending charges, $94.16. Another skincare order, placed this morning. I hadn't even had time to report the last ones, and already there were more. I clicked through the fraud reporting form, hands trembling. Halfway through, I stopped. Because something in me snapped, not like a twig, but like a chain. I wasn't just going to report this. I was going to document it. Every penny, every date, every excuse. They had taken my trust and turned it into an ATM. I had been compliant, generous, helpful because I believed that love meant support. But all I had done was teach them they could cross every line without consequence. Not anymore. I opened a spreadsheet and started typing. Feb 4, PS5, $499. Natalie. Feb 4, bath sets, $118. Carol, Mom. Feb 5, skincare, $72. Carol, Feb 6. We thought you'd understand. Left arrow, direct quote from Natalie when asked. I copied screenshots of the transactions. I took pictures of the packaging in the trash can. I even recorded a voice memo of the conversation while it was still fresh in my mind. Then I changed every password. I set up two-factor authentication. I froze the card and requested a new one. I updated my email security, my bank logins, everything. I wasn't paranoid. I was finally paying attention. At dinner, no one mentioned anything. No one apologized. It was as if my money, my boundaries, didn't exist. Dad grunted something about the Rays losing again. Natalie talked about a party she might go to that weekend. Mom reminded me to buy paper towels next time I ran to the store, as if my morning hadn't started with discovering $300 of unauthorized charges. I didn't answer. I barely touched my food, because all I could think about was how easy it had become for them. How automatic. How long had this been happening? How many other purchases had I chalked up to my own forgetfulness? After dinner, I checked the trash again. Sure enough, tucked between two pizza boxes was the PS5 box. I carried it back to my room like it was radioactive, sat on the floor with it, stared at it. It wasn't just a game console. It was a symbol of how little they respected me, of how they still saw me as a resource, not a person. And as I sat there, something shifted inside me. I had been trying so hard to keep the peace, to not make waves, to protect my relationship with my family. But what relationship was I protecting, really? They didn't want me to grow. They wanted me contained. Because the moment I had something of my own money, my own home, my own boundaries, they couldn't take from me so easily. They weren't rooting for me. They were stalling me. And I was done giving them more time. I took the box, taped it back up, and snapped photos from every angle. Then I drafted an email to the credit card company's fraud team and uploaded everything. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the muffled sound of the TV through the wall, I opened Zillow again, scrolled through listings. That condo with the little balcony was still available. I imagined sitting out there, coffee in hand, no one asking me to hand over my debit card or pay for takeout just this once. No one using my things. No one laughing when I said I was ready to move on. I clicked Contact Agent. Then, for the first time in a long while, I slept with a smile. It happened on a Tuesday. I was late getting home from work, traffic, a downpour, and a last-minute meeting that dragged longer than it should have. I'd barely stepped inside when I saw her, Natalie, standing in the hallway, soaked, wide-eyed, and furious. The entire left side of her face was flecked with tiny shards of glass. I didn't have to ask. "My car," she snapped before I could open my mouth. It fishtailed. I lost control, hydroplaned right off the interstate into a sign. I blinked. "What car?" She pointed outside, trembling with rage. "Your car." My body went still. "You took my car," I said slowly. "Without asking me," she scoffed, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "Don't be ridiculous, you weren't using it." I wasn't using it because I took the bus today, because I'd been trying to save gas money. I walked past her toward the front window. My Hyundai was parked crooked in the driveway. The bumper was hanging, the front right headlight shattered. The windshield was cracked like a spiderweb had exploded across it. It looked like it had been through a war. I didn't speak. Not when Mom came running in, asking if Natalie was okay. Not when Dad trailed in behind her, blaming the storm, the road, the tires. Anything except the fact that my sister had taken my property without permission and wrecked it. No one asked me if I was okay. No one looked me in the eye. "It's fine," Mom said, touching my arm lightly. "Insurance will cover it." But I'd already checked the policy weeks ago. Natalie wasn't listed on it, never had been, because I'd explicitly removed her after the last time she borrowed it and came back with a parking ticket and a cracked side mirror. "It won't cover everything," I said, finally finding my voice. Dad raised an eyebrow. "It's just a car, Emily." I laughed then. Not because it was funny, but because I had finally reached that point. That point where the weight doesn't hurt anymore. It just rolls off you like water, except this wasn't water, this was gasoline and they were striking matches. "Let me guess," I said. "You expect me to pay the difference?" Dad said nothing. Natalie crossed her arms. "Well, it's still your car, isn't it?" The audacity stunned me silent for a beat. I looked around at the three of them, my so-called family. They didn't see anything wrong with what had happened. Not the theft, not the damage, not the assumption that I would fix it, because I always fixed it. The fridge, the rent, the phone bill, the gas, everything. "I'm not paying a cent," I said, my voice cold and curt. Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Are you seriously going to make me pay to fix your car?" "It's not about the car," I said. "It's about the fact that none of you think boundaries apply to me, that my money, my things, my future are just community property." "Don't make this about something it's not," Mom said, like she was scolding a child. But I wasn't a child, and I wasn't stupid either. My down payment fund had just taken another hit. I could already see the invoice coming: tow truck, repairs, deductible. I wanted to scream. But what would be the point? They weren't listening. They never listened. That night, I sat on the floor in my room with the latest statement in front of me. Between the fraudulent charges and what the insurance wouldn't cover, I was now officially $1,834 further from my goal. Every time I inched forward, they pulled me back. And I was done. No more explanations. No more warnings. I was going to get out. No matter what it cost. The Cancun trip had been looming over me like a deadline I hadn't agreed to. Every day brought some new reminder. Mom scrolling through beachwear on her iPad, Dad asking if I had any spare points for hotel upgrades, Natalie throwing bikinis and maxi dresses across the couch like she lived in a resort already. They talked around me, not to me, but they knew. I was still footing the bill. At least, they thought I was. I'd already decided. I wasn't going to fund a vacation I never wanted with people who treated me like a walking bank account. But I needed to say it. Out loud. Plain, so one morning, over toast and 2 sweet coffee, I cleared my throat and said it straight. I'll pay for my part of the trip, but just mine, that's all. The silence that followed was the kind that changes the temperature in the room. Mom set her mug down like it had betrayed her. Excuse me. I'll cover my flight, my meals, anything I personally use, I said calmly. The rest, that's on you. Natalie laughed under her breath, shaking her head like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. Wow. So now you're better than us. No, I said, meeting her gaze, just done being used. The pause that followed was sharper than any insult. Mom blinked. Is this because of the car thing? We said we'd help fix it. You said that, I interrupted, but the estimate's still sitting on the counter and no one's touched it in a week. Dad finally spoke. Emily, this attitude of yours, it's not cute. You're being petty over a few things here and there. A few things, I repeated, swallowing hard. Mean like my entire credit card being drained, my car being totaled, and my savings constantly bled dry while I pretend it's fine. I hadn't raised my voice. But the room felt louder somehow, unsteady. Natalie stood and walked off, muttering, "You're ruining everything." Mom followed with her eyes narrowed, wounded. You know what, maybe don't come if it's going to be such a problem for you. There it was, the punishment. They wanted me to opt out so they could play the role of victim. But I didn't bite. Oh, I'm coming, I said, but on my terms. Then I went to my room and packed, not for them, for me. I folded every piece of clothing with care, I charged my devices, I backed up my files. I took photos of every document related to the trip, the tickets, the reservation emails, the insurance policy I had finally bought for myself, and I locked my suitcase. That night I stayed quiet. No more arguing, no more explaining, no more defending my right to exist with boundaries. Natalie slammed doors. Mom cooked dinner like a martyr, clanging every pot. Dad watched TV with the volume too loud. I ate in silence. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my teeth, because the more I pulled away, the more they clawed at the version of me they had built, agreeable, exhausted, too loyal to walk away. But that version was gone. I had scraps of independence left. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to board that plane. Enough to make a decision they weren't expecting. Because the trip wasn't the getaway they imagined. It was the final test of how far they could push me, and they were about to learn. I had finally reached the edge. I don't know what made me step into the hallway that night. Maybe it was the sound, whispers too quiet to be TV and too sharp to be sleep. Or maybe it was the stillness of the house, the kind that settles just before a storm. I paused outside my bedroom, ears straining. She'll pay for it all like always. Natalie's voice. Low, confident. Then Mom's, just keep her distracted until we're there. Once the trip starts, she won't say no, she never does. My breath caught. The hallway felt too narrow, the walls too close. I edged closer, barefoot, careful not to let the floorboards creak. They already put it on her card, Natalie asked. Mom gave a little laugh, soft, satisfied. Of course. I told the agent she'd be covering the full package, group rates and all. She'll figure it out eventually, Natalie said. By then, Mom answered, it'll be too late. The air left my lungs in a single silent rush. I stepped back, retreating toward my door like I'd just touched something hot. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking not with fear but something worse. Clarity. It hadn't been a misunderstanding, not an accident, not even carelessness. It was calculated. They deforged the charges. Used my name, my credit, my digital footprint, knowing I wouldn't check in time. Knowing that once we were there, sun on my face, drink in hand, I'd cave like I always did. But this time they had miscalculated one thing. I wasn't caving, I was done. I opened my laptop and started pulling everything. Credit card statements, email confirmations, the agent's name, the hotel's invoice, each line item charged in full to me. I screenshotted everything, creating a digital paper trail they couldn't deny. Then I called the fraud department. The agent on the phone was calm, efficient. Yes, Ms. Carson, we can flag those charges for review. However, please be aware, if they're processed during international travel, reversal becomes more difficult. What do I need to do? His voice was firm. Cancel any pending authorization before the first boarding scan. I stared at my screen, a dull throb building behind my eyes. They were going to trap me. Let me board that plane. Let the charges go through. Let me argue about it later while they posted tropical selfies. No. I wasn't going to be tricked into another sacrifice. This time, I was going to be the one making the moves. I opened a new tab and did what I should have done weeks ago. I booked my ticket solo, different airline, different departure time, different everything. I made sure it was non-refundable, non-transferable, tied to a different card under the new account I'd quietly opened last week. I chose a window seat. I even paid extra for early boarding, because this time I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Next, I called a travel advisor recommended by a coworker. The woman on the line didn't ask questions. She just listened, then walked me through steps to secure my identity, lock my information, and flag suspicious behavior. "You're doing the right thing," she said gently. "I'm not sure it's the easy thing," I murmured. She laughed, kind but clear. "It never is." When I hung up, it was nearly 2 a.m. outside. The house was silent again. But I was. Inside, a storm had started. Not loud, not wild, but steady. I packed my bag again, this time with precision. Every item chosen with intent. Every outfit for me. No one else would be touching my things. No one else would swipe my card. No one else would decide what I owed. And as I zipped the suitcase shut, one final thought flickered through me. They had planned to ambush me with palm trees and guilt. But they had forgotten the most important part. You can't trap someone who's already chosen to walk away. The next morning felt like a dress rehearsal for a play I had no intention of performing. Natalie strutted through the kitchen in a matching turquoise tracksuit and oversized sunglasses, already in vacation mode. She tossed her duffel near the door and asked if I'd remembered to charge the portable speaker. I didn't answer. Mom was microwaving her travel neck pillow again, some strange routine she swore helped loosen the stuffing, while reminding me to double-check our boarding times. I smiled politely. I nodded. Inside, I was ticking down a mental checklist. Financial advisor, heavy fraud charges in process. Heavy my ticket booked under a new ID profile. Heavy solo airbnb confirmed. Heavy my family still had no clue. Heavy. At 1:45 p.m., I excused myself to run last-minute errands. Really, I was driving across town to meet a woman named Sandra Ortiz, a financial consultant my HR director had referred after I asked, quietly, if our company offered support for identity protection. Sandra greeted me in a tiny, efficient office filled with green plants and certificates lining every wall. "Emily Carson," she said warmly, shaking my hand. "I read your email. You've taken the right first steps, but we've got a few more things to lock down." She explained everything calmly: how to freeze my credit temporarily, how to monitor suspicious activity, how to remove travel authorizations from my current cards, especially anything booked under shared accounts. "I can file all of these before midnight," she said, "but if they try to charge anything mid-flight, it's going to be a mess. You need to cancel those tickets before boarding." I nodded. "I plan to," she leaned in. "You know you don't have to go with them." "I'm not," I said. For the first time that day, it felt real. Not just something I was surviving, but something I was choosing. When I got home that evening, the house was bustling. Mom was barking orders about carry-ons. Dad was mumbling about the TSA line. Natalie was pacing, asking if anyone had seen her passport. It was in her purse the entire time, obviously. I wheeled my suitcase into my room and quietly locked the door. Then I opened my burner email, the one tied to my new solo travel account, and confirmed the message I'd been waiting for. Airline A489 departure confirmed. 4:15 a.m. Tampa International Right Arrow Aruba not Cancun. Not with them. Somewhere new, somewhere mine. I opened the airline app connected to my primary card, the one they'd used. 3 tickets were still linked. My name, Carol Carson, Natalie Carson. They hadn't even tried to use their own cards, just mine. Just like always, I didn't flinch. Instead, I clicked into the settings and selected Cancel all passenger flights, notify via email only. Reason: fraudulent charges. A confirmation window popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel all tickets associated with this itinerary?" I stared at the screen, pulse steady, and clicked yes. Just like that, 3 vacations evaporated. I snapped a screenshot of the cancellation receipt and archived it. Not to be petty, but to be prepared. Because they'd come looking for answers. And for once, I'd have all of them ready. Later that night, I took a long, hot shower, packed the last of my things, set 3 alarms. At midnight, I slipped into bed with my phone on airplane mode. I slept like a woman with nothing left to lose. because in a few hours I'd be stepping into the terminal with one carry-on, a booked room waiting in the Caribbean, and a freshly signed declaration. I don't owe them anything. Not my money, not my silence. And certainly not this vacation. At 4:15 a.m., Tampa International Airport hummed with the soft rustle of suitcases and the low murmur of sleep-deprived travelers. I stood at gate C12, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that was far too hot, and exactly what I needed. I'd made it through security with no trouble. My solo boarding pass scanned clean. My bag slid onto the belt without anyone rifling through it for things they forgot to pack. No last-minute chaos. No whispered manipulations, just me. I sat by the window, watching the sky begin to warm. The horizon stretched wide and pink, like the world was giving me a nod. This is yours now. That's when my phone, finally back off airplane mode, began to light up. Mom, where are our boarding passes? NATALA, what's going on? Dad, Emily, answer the phone. Now, I didn't. I opened my camera instead, snapped a photo of my cup beside the boarding screen behind me, and attached it in a single reply to our family group chat. Enjoy the trip, I am. 3 dots appeared, then nothing. I slipped my phone into my pocket just as they called my boarding group. Group 1, I smiled. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to feel priority. The walk down the jet bridge felt surreal, like I was shedding the version of myself they'd spent years crafting. The girl who always cleaned up their messes. Who took the blame, who kept quiet. That girl wasn't on this flight. She didn't make it to the gate. I found my seat, a window, row 6, and buckled in. A middle-aged woman sat beside me, already dozing with a neck pillow. The flight attendant offered me a warm smile and a bottle of water. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat was tight, not with sadness. With relief. I reached into my carry-on and pulled out the folder I'd labeled weeks ago, New Life. Inside were the condo listings, bank statements under my new account, the pre-approval letter from the lender, and a digital notary packet I'd scheduled to complete during the layover. I would land in Aruba. I would walk into sunlight. I would sign the documents. And I would be free. As the plane began to taxi, I looked out the window. The city that had always felt like a cage was shrinking below me. The suburbs, the rows of houses. The streets I'd driven 100 times, always looping back to the same driveway where I was both guest and provider. They would wake up eventually. Maybe they already had. They'd scream, accuse, guilt, play victim. The calls would come. The texts would multiply. They'd demand explanations, apologies, answers, but I'd given them everything already. Years of yes. Years of being the fallback plan. Now I was choosing silence. Because sometimes, silence is louder than any confrontation. Sometimes, not answering is the answer. I watched the wings tilt as the plane climbed. With every foot of altitude, I felt lighter. They had expected a meltdown, an argument, a last-minute surrender. Instead, I left them with exactly what they'd given me for years. Nothing, no help, no backup, no support. Only this time it was intentional. The clouds parted as we soared, golden light breaking through. And for the first time in years, I let it touch me without guilt. I turned off my phone mid-flight. Not to be dramatic, not to hide, but because I didn't want to carry their noise into the sky with me. The plane sliced through clouds like it was carving a new path just for me, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself the stillness of being unreachable. When we landed in Aruba, the sun poured through the airplane window like honey. I stepped off the plane and into the kind of air that smells like salt, hibiscus, and new beginnings. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't post. I just walked. I found a cab outside the terminal, gave the driver the address of my rented bungalow, and sat in the backseat with the window cracked just enough to feel the breeze on my skin. I kept thinking, they don't know where I am. Not one of them knew. And it felt divine. The bungalow was nothing fancy. White stucco walls, chipped teal shutters, and a wraparound porch that creaked when I stepped on it. But it was mine. For the weekend, at least. No Natalie rifling through my bag. No mom knocking on the bathroom door while I'm inside. No dad asking if I could run to the store real quick. Just me. And the ocean, somewhere behind the dunes. I left my suitcase inside and walked barefoot to the beach. The sand was warm, a little coarse, like it wanted you to know it was real. The waves weren't dramatic, just steady, rhythmic like a pulse. And mine finally matched them. I sat for a long time, legs tucked under me, letting the silence seep in. Then I pulled out my tablet and opened the notary link. The lender's representative popped up on video, cheerful, professional. Ready to finalize, Ms. Carson? I nodded, breath shallow. Once you sign, your offer becomes binding. Are you sure? I glanced toward the ocean one last time, then back at the screen. Yes, I've never been more sure of anything. Click, click, sign. My name again and again, in digital ink that would shape the next chapter of my life. When it was done, the notary gave me a soft smile. Congratulations, you're about to be a homeowner. I ended the call and stared at the confirmation for a long moment. The condo, my condo, with its tiny balcony, cracked tile, and sunlight that spilled across the floor every morning like a quiet promise. Every inch of it would be mine. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 4 years. Back inside the bungalow, I made a simple dinner: fruit, cheese, some fresh bread. I poured myself a glass of wine and took it back out to the porch, where I lit a candle and let the night wrap around me like a soft shawl. My phone buzzed once from inside. I didn't check. I already knew what it would say: angry texts, missed calls, demands for answers. But I'd already given them all the answers they needed, and no explanation I could offer would satisfy them more than the truth they'd never accept. They didn't lose me over one canceled trip. They lost me after 1,000 small takings, and I finally stopped letting them take. As the stars came out, I raised my glass to the wind. To quiet, I whispered, and to finally hearing myself think. Florida felt different when I returned. The air wasn't heavier, the streets weren't darker, but something inside me had shifted, and the life I was walking back into no longer fit. Like a coat I'd outgrown but kept wearing out of habit, I didn't go back to the family house. I'd already made arrangements. The keys to my condo were waiting at the agent's office, along with a small, handwritten note from the seller. She's all yours now. Be gentle, she's got good bones. Good bones, that made me smile. The place was exactly what I remembered from the listing photos. One bedroom, scuffed hardwood floors, a tiny galley kitchen that needed love, and a front door that locked with a sound that filled my chest with something I hadn't felt in years: peace. It wasn't just that it was mine. It was that every inch of it, every light switch, every drawer, every squeaky cabinet answered only to me. I moved in over a weekend. No announcements, no invitations, no family, just me, a moving van, and a playlist I hadn't let anyone else edit. The silence was delicious. No footsteps outside my door, no borrowed things, no guilt. In this small, sunlit space, I was accountable to no one but myself. And while I unpacked, the world outside kept turning. I started noticing small ripples in the distance. Natalie, once glued to her influencer persona and weekend shopping sprees, was suddenly quiet on Instagram. The endless hauls and unboxings were gone, replaced with the occasional filtered coffee photo and a cryptic caption about resetting. A week later, I saw her behind the register at the local grocery store. She didn't see me. But I saw the chipped nails, the barely there mascara, the haunted look of someone learning for the first time how to clock in. Mom and Dad, I heard through quiet channels, were downsizing. Their cable had been shut off and the pest control bill had gone unpaid. A neighbor mentioned they were trying to sublet the guest room to help with cash flow. No one had told them yet that I'd officially removed my name from every shared account, utility, and backup card. I wasn't funding their life anymore. And it showed. The chaos I used to absorb had finally found its rightful owners. I didn't gloat, but I didn't rescue them either. Because this was the natural consequence of cutting off a pipeline, and for once I let the discomfort be theirs. One afternoon, as I hung up sheer curtains in my bedroom, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery: flowers. No card, no name, just a simple bouquet of white tulips and eucalyptus bound with twine. Beautiful, intentional, not my style, but maybe hers. I set them in water but didn't reach out. If it was Mom, she knew where I lived now. That was enough. Later that night, I stood barefoot in my new kitchen, glass of water in hand, soft jazz playing low. I looked around at the walls that didn't hold anyone else's noise, and I realized this wasn't just a home. It was a boundary made real. For years, I asked for respect, and they taught me something painful but necessary: if you have to beg for it, it's not real. Respect isn't given when requested. It's enforced when required. A year later, I hosted dinner in my own kitchen. Not the kind of dinner where someone critiques the seasoning or asks why you didn't make more. Not the kind where love is measured in obligation, and your worth is tied to what you can provide. This one was different. 3 friends from work sat around my little wooden table, laughing over wine and trading stories about impossible clients and half-finished novels. I'd made pasta simple, homemade, and slightly too garlicky, and no one complained. The condo was still modest. The paint on the baseboards chipped in places. The faucet had a slow drip I hadn't quite figured out yet. But it was mine, every dish, every fork, every inch of space. And above the table, in a sleek black frame, hung the deed to the condo. Emily Carson, sole owner. I hadn't hung it to brag. I'd hung it to remember. To remind myself what it took to get here. That independence isn't handed to you with a smile. It's wrestled free when the cost of staying silent becomes too great. Natalie hadn't spoken to me in months. Mom sent a birthday text, carefully void of apology or warmth. Dad never reached out at all. And that was fine. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because I'd forgiven them, but because I'd finally stopped hoping they'd change. Letting go of the version of them I needed had given me space to build a life that didn't depend on their approval or their chaos. I toasted to that life with my friends that night. To quiet, to earned peace. To boundaries drawn not in sand but in stone. As we clinked glasses, one of them asked, "If you could go back and tell yourself one thing, back when all that was happening, what would it be?" I smiled. That boundaries aren't betrayal, they're protection. And if you're watching this, and you've ever felt guilty for wanting a life that's yours, I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me. You don't owe anyone access to the parts of you they've only ever taken for granted. And if you made it to the end of my story, tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? Because no matter where you are, you deserve a home, whether it's a place, a moment, or a piece, that no one else gets to control.